With 4 races remaining, we make our way to the Brazilian GP as the last race in this triple header to one of my favorite races of the year, with an amazing track, amazing action, and amazing fans every year. For this video, I would try to have an entire section dedicated to upgrades coming for Brazil, but as this is only the 4th race from the end, not many upgrades are coming. We do have one confirmed upgrade from a team and a couple potential teams bringing upgrades, but these upgrades are minor. And after that, I'll go over the main things to expect from the Brazilian GP and then my predictions for the top drivers and teams for the next race. In terms of upgrades, with this being the 4th race from the end, not many teams are bringing any upgrades. We do know that McLaren plan on bringing some upgrades, and this was confirmed by Andrea Stella, but we don't know what they're bringing, and obviously it will be a very small upgrade, just hoping to improve the car a little bit to get some extra pace. Luckily, McLaren is really good with upgrades, and their upgrades seem to always work, unlike some other teams. And what we do know for sure is that the new floor is coming for Piastri. This is the same floor that they brought to Mexico for Lando, and obviously it did work. Something I did notice is that the McLaren seems to be working a lot better in the slipstream and dirty air of other drivers. We saw Lando being able to stay behind Leclerc and behind Verstappen a lot more easily than I think the old McLaren without this floor upgrade could have done in previous races. But something that they're clearly still struggling with is high fuel loads. For some reason, the McLaren is just not as fast when it is in high fuel, and towards the end of the race, within the last 15 laps, Lando always starts flying, but typically he falls short by a couple of laps, and it's something that they should try to understand better. I think even the team has mentioned that they don't fully understand why this is happening. So for the rest of the teams, I don't have any confirmed upgrades that I know of. We do know that Ferrari had a change in the front wing at Coda. It didn't appear as an upgrade, and they didn't have to tell FIA about this because it was simply a small adjustment and it wasn't a new spec piece. Something we do know is that Aston Martin plans on not bringing any further upgrades whatsoever for the remainder of the races, and that Red Bull does plan on bringing some upgrade at some point. If it's not in Brazil, then it will be likely in Qatar. Moving on, there are a few things that I would be looking out for and expecting at the Brazilian GP. The first being Aston Martin. If we look back to last year, in 2023, Aston Martin did quite horribly at Mexico, but then performed really well at the Brazilian GP, with Fernando having that great defense against Perez that lasted multiple laps and securing P3 by a tiny fraction at the very end of the race. We did see Aston Martin running big aero tests during the practice at Mexico, something that they did last year, and so maybe we see them performing great again this year at Brazil. That's something I really hope we see, because Aston Martin really have not been having a great season, and hopefully next year, with what they learned from this year and that new wind tunnel and Adrian Newey joining the team, we see Fernando back on the podiums where he belongs. Another thing that I think we should be looking out for is McLaren. So McLaren had a much worse car last year, but they performed amazingly. And with the new car that they have now, I am expecting great things from Lando. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we got another great performance from him, just like Singapore. But it all does depend on the first lap, if he can get that clean air and start first throughout the entire lap and start flying from there. But with the first corner being so close to the start line, all we need to hope for is that Lando starts on pole and he can continue taking points from Verstappen. Now, I don't think that the Red Bull will perform amazingly this year, especially with other teams being so close to them. With the current cars we have right now, I really don't think we will see Max fighting for the win. Maybe potentially we'll see him fighting for P3 or a podium position, maybe P4 or P5. And as for Perez, well, honestly, I don't even think that he'll finish in the points, and there's not much point talking about him anyways. I did mention in my past videos that maybe Red Bull will decide to remove Perez from the team after Mexico, but with only 4 races remaining, maybe they do decide to keep him, and we'll see. As for now, we have no proof or news about this, so we just have to assume that Perez will remain racing for the Red Bull seat for the Brazilian GP. In terms of Ferrari, it's hard to say where they will be. Obviously, they will be fast with the new front wing that they implemented at Coda, working really well with the car aerodynamically. I do obviously think that they will be fighting for the win here, but at least be McLaren's closest competitor. But I do expect to see a big difference between the McLaren pace and the Ferrari pace and of course the Red Bull and the Mercedes pace. So with that, here are my predictions for the 2024 Brazilian GP, starting off with my top 4 teams. I think that McLaren will be the fastest. They were really fast last year and their car has improved significantly since. Then I think Ferrari will be second and will continue to show their pace and momentum that they've been showing in the past few races. I think Red Bull would be the third fastest car here and not so closely followed by Mercedes, who seem to have lost a bit of pace starting these 3 triple headers. My predictions for the top 3 drivers is Piastri. Hopefully we see him return the form that he's been lacking in the last 2 races, making mistakes and in qualifying and just not keeping up with Lando's pace in Mexico. He didn't have the new upgraded floor in Mexico, which Lando did have, so he will be using it in Brazil and we will see if his pace improves. And for P2, I have Sainz. I think the last 2 races he's actually been the strongest driver, even in Coda, which he did not win. But he's been showing amazing pace, amazing intelligence throughout the races, and I do think that he will outperform Leclerc once again, and it's really sad to see him go to Williams next year when his current pace is this strong. And lastly, I do think we will have another win from Norris. I think he will be very strong this year in Brazil. In terms of whether or not he has a chance at the championship, it really depends if the Red Bull is worse than the Mercedes at this point, because they need to have as many drivers between Max and Norris to maximize how many points Norris takes over Max. One last thing I'd like to mention is look out for Liam's performance. This is something I suggest we do throughout the last few races anyways, to compare with Perez. With that, I think that either way, no matter the results, Brazil will bring us a banger as it usually does. This track is really short but has a lot of great corners, a really good straight with DRS that leads into a snake section that supports lots of great overtaking, followed by another DRS zone that gives us even more overtaking, and it's also a very good track for very good drivers, which is why I think Alonso was capable of defending against Perez, who had a very clear advantage in terms of his car over Alonso. So either way, I am very excited for this race and I can't wait to see how it goes. If you did make it this far into the video, I really do appreciate it and I hope you like my videos and those to come, and maybe consider subscribing.